Web Forms is an established development framework that was released over a decade ago. I'll assume you have at least a general concept of this technology, so we'll spend very little time on basic introductions. Instead, we want to analyze some of the main design aspects of web forms and why they might cause challenges for modern applications. These are the types of obstacles that might lead you to consider other platforms. So just as a very quick overview, Web Forms is built on top of ASP.NET, which is a great platform and offers features like HTTP modules and handlers, security, session, caching, and much more. Many of these features are still really compelling today. The Web Forms framework itself also provides some interesting features, such as markup generation, the illusion of state, code separation, and reusable components. Let's look more closely at the pros and cons of some of these features. Web Forms was released around the same time as Windows Forms, which at the time was a popular framework for building desktop applications. Windows Forms allows developers to build programs using a variety of tools and controls on top of a drag-and-drop GUI interface inside Visual Studio. These controls are backed by C# or VB classes that add associated event handlers and logic. For better or worse, Microsoft attempted to translate much of the Windows Forms experience to the web. Many developers found this workflow appealing because it felt familiar and handled limited HTML generation for you in case your markup skills weren't too sharp yet. One problem with this approach is the server controls are often too high level in abstraction over the HTML, especially for more complex data-driven controls. These controls can often clutter your client-side markup during development and generate non-ideal HTML in the browser even after rendering. This problem became more painful over time with the rise of responsive design and lightweight exact HTML. One of the most significant features of Web Forms is the way that it tries to provide the illusion of state for web applications. Web apps are built on the stateless HTTP protocol, meaning individual HTTP requests are made to a server and it returns a response to the client. Each request basically stands alone, and the server and the client generally have no real-time sense of a shared working environment. This is a very different concept from building local Windows Forms applications, which often run entirely on a client computer and have continuous real-time access to its resources. Web Forms attempted to blur the stateless nature of the web through a feature called ViewState. This feature sends additional data to the server with every request about the current state of the application. The Web Forms framework running on the server would process this information during its page lifecycle and then return responses that are influenced by that data. This provides some nice features like auto-repopulating form fields. However, this process also increases the size of every HTTP request, and the page lifecycle itself was complex enough that many developers did not fully understand it, and this could result in them writing buggy code. In an age of RESTful web services, heavy use of AJAX, and mobile app requests, development trends have shifted towards embracing the stateless nature of HTTP rather than masking it. Web Forms also attempted to fix issues with frameworks that had come before it, such as classic ASP, which mixed together server and client-side code in the same file and could quickly become a mess. Web Forms allows you to have a code behind file where you can place the majority of your server-side logic in a regular C# class, and then place your front-end markup in a special ASPX file. The server controls that replaced HTML elements were designed to communicate neatly with these code files using an event-driven design. Although this design appeared to provide a separation of concerns, in reality it just produced different problems with very tightly coupled components. Client and server-side code are still directly tied together in this model because they are basically two halves of the same page. In many modern frameworks, we don't care about the actual button click or serving up a physical file from a directory to handle it. We just care about the user's intent and creating an appropriate response. For example, if a user is trying to check out from the mobile app of our online store, the backend platform might need to respond with JSON data. However, someone else who is using the full website might need a proper HTML page sent back. Put simply, whether the checkout request was triggered by a button click is irrelevant. We just want to handle the desired action of checking out with a dynamically appropriate response. Web Forms has also not aged well in terms of supporting modern dev concepts like unit testing and dependency injection. This is partially due to the tightly coupled nature of much of Web Forms like we just discussed. Remember, Web Forms is also not as flexible in terms of handling AJAX requests and other web service type behavior due to that tight coupling of physical pages rather than HTTP endpoints. These are all important considerations for a modern web architecture. As you may have guessed, the MVC framework addresses many of these issues with some trade-offs, and it offers some new features as well. Let's review this newer framework more in the next lesson.